Welcome to the My Creative Days podcast, where we will talk about all things DIY, home decor, decorating tips, and creating a beautiful home on a budget. I am hoping our time together will spark a creative idea, help you plan your next DIY, or inspire you to finally tackle that project you keep putting off. Grab your favorite cup of motivation and let's chat. Hello and welcome back to the podcast. Today I'm going to be talking about how to run the numbers so you don't lose money when you're flipping a house. So this can work for both. This is going to basically work for flipping houses to sell, but so Matt and I have done both. We have flipped to sell and we have flipped to rent. But even your rental houses or duplexes or whatever you have, in the end, after a few years, you may want to sell them. So it is good to know what they will be worth in the end and running the numbers before you buy them. I cannot emphasize enough how important this is. You have to know your numbers. If you don't know your numbers, you're going to lose money and it's not worth it. And Matt and I, for 5 years, looked at so many houses, so many options. And for 5 years, they were all no's. A lot of them, we would just go look at them and then crunch the numbers and no. And we wanted a project house to flip, to sell, to rent, to whatever for so long. And so when you are somebody that's like, I want to do this, and if you think you're going to go out, in a week or a month and find one, if you think you're going to find one that makes sense, that is not going to happen. I'm just going to say that is not going to happen. I mean, it can happen, but it just doesn't work that way. And the main thing is running the numbers to make sure it makes sense. Because if it doesn't make sense, I mean, it's a definite no. So just don't try to make it make sense. Don't try to make it happen. Don't try to crunch the numbers even harder and make the budget even smaller. No, it's a no. It's a definite no. So I'm going to tell you how we run the numbers and just some things that you should do so you don't lose money. Flipping is not about paint colors and pretty fixtures. I'm telling you that. This other stuff, I know it's not as exciting, but the truth is, if you get this wrong, the numbers wrong, you're going to eat into your profit really fast and you're not going to make any money. Okay. So number one, figure out what the house would sell for once it's fixed up. So look at recently sold items in the same neighborhood that are similar in size, style, and condition. Same number bathrooms, same number bedrooms, maybe it's the yard size, whatever it is. Close in square footage, all of that. You want to make sure that you are comparing apples to apples. You are not going to compare this house to one that's across the city or one that's 30 minutes away or one that's in a, let's say, different school district or one that's got an acre with it and yours doesn't. Like, you have to be comparing apples to apples, right? Because those are your comps. If a realtor were to give you comps, they're not looking at houses that don't even compare to yours, right? So you need to make sure you're doing apples to apples. Only compare those houses that have the same number of bedrooms, bathrooms, and are closer in square footage. And if you do, and it needs to be location too. And so let's say you find one that has, one less bathroom or one less bedroom. That still can give you that's going to give you a good idea. And, okay, we have an extra bedroom and an extra bathroom. So we could maybe get a little bit more, but it is going to give you a good idea of what your comps are, much more than if you're going across town. That doesn't work. It needs to be apples to apples. This will give you the realistic finished value for your project, right? Top price you can expect once everything is done. So number two, you're going to estimate your repair and update costs. So think about everything it's going to take to get the house from where it is now to that finished value state, okay? This needs to include big things: kitchens, bathrooms, roofs, windows, smaller things like paint, light fixtures, flooring, those kinds of things. And if you, depending on where the house is, depending on the market you're in, you need to think about your ideal customer. So Is this going to be a house for a first-time buyer, second-time buyer, retired couple? You need to be thinking about your buyer. Who is that ideal buyer in that neighborhood for that house in the end, right? If it's a new time, like a first-time home buyer, you think, okay, this is going to be, a married couple. They just got married and they're looking for their first house. Things like the roof, new windows, bathrooms, kitchens, those are going to be important to those people, right? You need to take that all into account when you're doing your repair and update costs. Get quotes from contractors early, right? And then here's the kicker. My dad always taught us this. Pad your budget by 10 to 20% for surprises, because I'm telling you, there's always going to be unexpected surprises. So you always need to pad your budget. And sometimes I pad ours way too much. And then when we're actually in the project, I'm always trying to cut my budget. So let's say, okay, I put $1,000 in this for the bathroom update or whatever. Now, I'm going to tell you this right now. I want to do that bathroom for $500 if I can. Like, that is always my challenge. And that's always okay, we're going to find the best vanity. Or I always set my budgets a little high per project, but then I also pad the overall budget as well. But then when I'm in there, I'm trying to save money wherever I can save money. So just a little side tip there. So, and if you're doing some of the work yourself, which we always do, count the cost of materials and any tools you'll need. So maybe it's something like, if we put in a privacy fence along the back of this property, we've got like a post hole digger, but Matt said, I'm not doing that. I'm going to go rent an auger. Is that what they're called? So like renting the auger would be an additional price beyond something that we don't just have, in our tools or whatever, something like that. So you definitely want to think of all those things like, okay, we may have to go rent such and such to do that project. Make sure you add that to your costs. Okay. And step 3, make sure there's enough profit left over. So once you know the finished value, now you know your repair cost, then you're going to subtract the repair cost and all the other costs like closing fees, taxes, insurance, realtor fees if you're using them. We have not used any realtors this will be 10 projects that we have done, but if you're using one, make sure you subtract those fees from that top sale price. What's left is your profit. Now, is that worth your time and risk? I'm going to tell you, my dad used to flip houses when I was growing up. He was always in the construction. That was his job. He used to build houses, and then he would do build decks for people, like do side jobs. And then he would flip houses on his own. And so for years, my dad did that. And for now, if you don't know, my dad's in a nursing home with dementia, but we learned so much from my dad. And it's like, Matt and I talk all the time. Oh my gosh, if your dad only knew like what we're doing right now and how far we've come. And I wish my dad was along for the ride. And, even if he didn't want to do the work, like he could just come and drive to the properties and see what we're doing, just offer his advice. I wish that with all my heart and soul, but it's not like that now. But there were times when he was flipping houses and his end profit was horrible. Like, I can't believe he did that. And so when we started flipping houses on our own, when he was able to drive over and see the projects and everything, he couldn't believe what we were doing. Times have changed, I know that, but you definitely want to make sure that is the profit worth your time and your risk? Because all of these, they are a risk, right? A good rule of thumb for this is aim for a profit that makes sense for the amount of work involved and the money you're tying up during the project. And this is going to look different, and you can finance these projects in so many different ways. And I did a whole podcast about that. For most of ours, we would pay cash, and then, so we would have that money tied up during the project, and then we were paying, the repair costs and all that on top of that. So, and usually our timeline is 3 to 4 months. So we've got all that money tied up for 3 to 4 months. What does that look like if you've got it sitting in wherever you have your money sitting? What does that look like for 3 to 4 months? What are you missing out on? I'm going to tell you over and over again, real estate is such a good investment. I think so. I will never give you financial advice. I am not a professional, nothing like that. But I've always been told, and what we've been through, real estate has been a good investment. But there's also stupid buys, right? And there's stupid investments. Not all house is worth it. Not all project is worth it. So you definitely need to know your numbers and make sure that it makes sense in the end. So just go into it knowing that. And the more and more you do it, the easier and easier this will be, right? It'll be kind of like second nature. I'm taking a quick break from the episode to share some exciting news with you. If you have ever wanted to flip furniture for extra cash, a creative outlet, or to build a business but didn't know where to start, there's never been a better time. My Furniture Flipping Academy is now just $79, which is over $200 off the original price. Inside, you'll learn how to find amazing pieces on a budget or for free, how to transform them step by step, sanding, painting, staging, all the things, how to price and sell for real profit, and even know how to work with brands to grow your flipping business in more ways than you know. And that's just the start. There is so much more waiting for you inside the academy. We have so much packed inside the academy. It's completely self-paced. Once you buy it, it's yours for life. There are no deadlines. There's no pressure. We do have a sneak peek inside the link in the show notes. It will give you a glimpse inside the academy. And here's the truth. Nothing changes unless you do. You can keep waiting for the right time, or you can take this step now. At $79, the price isn't holding you back anymore. So stop hesitating. Stop making excuses. Click the link and get started today. When Matt and I were getting into it after 5 years, we were talking with this lady we've worked before who we were buying the house from, and we still came out good. We are still great, but then the next two that we bought from her, it was a lot better. Number 4, do not forget the extra costs. Okay, so these are things that people do not think about. But you have to think about things. So holding costs, when you hear people talk about what are the holding costs, that's things like utilities, property taxes, and insurance while you own the house. So you're working on the house for 3 months, 6 months, a year, I don't care. You have those holding costs that you have to cover while you have the house. Selling costs. So if you're using a realtor, the commissions, the closing costs, staging, if that's part of your process. These are all cost extras that you need to be thinking about. Financing costs. So here, if you're financing it, your interest or fees, if you're borrowing money, if you're borrowing money from a private, like a third-party person or a bank, what are the interest fees, the fees that go along with that? What does that look like? That has to be included in your cost. And these are the things that can add up quickly, right? So always factor them in before you buy. And always, like I said, pad the budget. You will come across things and you're like, well, I do know that the garage floor needs to be lifted and the whole garage is kind of sagging on one side. So we had that budgeted. But then, you just don't budget for your husband trying to level a overhead garage door on his own. And it ends up worse than when it was when they got the concrete done. Things like that where you're like, okay, can we finally call the professionals in and get this done? So you're just going to always have those extra costs. So you need to pad your full budget. Flipping is fun. Flipping to sell, flipping to rent. It is fun. It is exciting, can be stressful. It is a lot of work. The money is made before you even buy the property, right? It's made in the way that you run your numbers. If you take the time to figure out what the house will realistically sell for and what it's going to cost to get it there, what you need to make it worth it, you'll save yourself from buying a money pit. I'm telling you. Be conservative with your numbers. It's much better to be pleasantly surprised at the end than to find out you've basically been working for free, right? So you just pad that budget. You think it's going to cost $1,000 for that project? Put down $1,200. You just want to make sure that you are covered. And then, like I said, when we get into a project, I put down $1,200. I'm hoping I can get this thing done for $600. You just want to make sure that it's worth it and run those numbers before you even put in an offer and buy it. So that's it for today's podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, found it helpful, please share the podcast. I'd also love it if you take a minute to rate and review the podcast, no matter where you're listening. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else. Your support truly helps. It not only helps more people find the show, but it also lets me know what kind of content you're loving. So if you have a second, tap the stars, leave a quick review, and know that I appreciate every single one. Thanks for being here, and I'll talk to you next time. Hello, friends. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I'm grateful that you tune in every week and that you share the show with your family and friends. I love having creative chit chats with you, and my hope is that this podcast will inspire you to try a new project, start a DIY that you've been putting off, and decorate your home exactly how you want it. There are a few ways you can help us with the podcast. Follow the podcast so you don't miss an episode. And if you could take a few minutes to leave the podcast a review, that would help us so much. Again, thank you for being here, and I look forward to our chat next week. Bye-bye.